I knew the moment I opened my front door and saw the neon orange envelope wedged between the screen and frame that my day was about to go sideways. The temperature outside my house in Boulder, Colorado had dropped to 15 degrees overnight, and a fresh blanket of snow covered everything within sight. My breath fogged in the frigid morning air as I pulled the envelope free, the HOA logo stamped across it like some kind of scarlet letter. Inside was a violation notice dated that very morning, somehow delivered before 7 in the morning, which should have been my first clue that something was seriously wrong with these people. The letter informed me, in the most passive-aggressive corporate language imaginable, that I had 24 hours to remove all snow accumulation from my property or face a fine of $500 per day until compliance was achieved. My name, Frank Anderson, was typed at the top in bold letters like I was some kind of criminal. I stood there in my thermal pajamas and winter boots, reading the notice 3 times to make sure I was understanding this correctly. They wanted me to remove snow from Colorado in January, during one of the heaviest snowfall seasons we had experienced in 5 years. The audacity was almost impressive. My neighborhood, Pinecrest Estates, had always been particular about appearances. When I bought my 3-bedroom ranch-style home here 2 years ago, I knew I was signing up for certain standards. The HOA kept the community pool clean, maintained the walking paths, and made sure nobody painted their house neon pink or let their lawn turn into a jungle. Reasonable stuff. But this was crossing a line I did not even know existed. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office, which according to their website opened at 8. It was now 7:15, but I figured I would leave a message. To my surprise, someone picked up on the second ring. Pinecrest Estates, HOA, this is Barbara speaking. How may I help you? The voice was clipped, professional, and already annoyed despite the early hour. Yeah, hi, this is Frank Anderson from 2847 Snowberry Lane. I just got a violation notice about snow on my property, and I think there's been some kind of mistake. No mistake, Mr. Anderson. Our property inspector conducted a walk-through at 6 this morning and documented multiple violations across the community. Your property had snow accumulation exceeding 3 inches on your driveway, walkway, and front lawn. I blinked, certain I had entered some kind of alternate dimension. Madam, it snowed 8 inches last night. Everyone in the neighborhood has snow on their property. Not everyone, Mr. Anderson. The HOA regulations clearly state that all snow must be removed within 12 hours of snowfall cessation. It stopped snowing at 6 p.m. yesterday evening, which means you had until 6 this morning to clear your property. That's insane. Nobody can be expected to shovel snow at 6 in the morning, especially when it is still dark and dangerous. The rules are clearly outlined in your HOA agreement, which you signed upon purchasing your home. We expect all residents to comply. Have a good day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. This could not be happening. I had lived through 2 winters here already without incident. Nobody had ever mentioned anything about clearing snow within 12 hours. I pulled out my laptop and searched through my email archives until I found my HOA agreement from 2 years ago. I scrolled through 47 pages of legal jargon until I found the section on property maintenance. There it was, buried in subsection 12, paragraph 4. All frozen precipitation must be removed from driveways, walkways, and visible lawn areas within 12 hours of precipitation cessation to maintain community aesthetics and safety standards. I had never noticed it before because who in their right mind would enforce such a ridiculous rule? Apparently, Barbara and whoever this mysterious property inspector was. That was who. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Greg, who lived 3 houses down. "Did you get a snow violation notice too? This is crazy." I texted back. "Yeah, just got off the phone with the HOA. They are serious about this." Greg, "At least 8 houses on our street got the same notice." Everyone is losing their minds. This was bigger than just me then. The HOA was making a coordinated push to enforce this insane regulation across the entire neighborhood. But why now, after years of looking the other way? I threw on proper clothes, grabbed my snow shovel from the garage, and started clearing my driveway. The work was brutal. 8 inches of heavy, wet snow took me nearly 3 hours to move. My back ached, my fingers were numb despite my gloves, and I was sweating under my winter coat despite the freezing temperature. By the time I finished the driveway and walkway, it was past 10 in the morning, and I still had to deal with the front lawn. Clearing snow from a lawn is pointless. It will melt on its own eventually, and there is no safety reason to remove it. But the HOA had spoken, and I was not about to hand them $500 a day for the privilege of having weather on my property. I was halfway through clearing the lawn, essentially just pushing snow from one part of my property to the edge near the street, when a silver Lexus pulled up and parked in front of my house. A woman in her mid-50s stepped out, wearing a puffy cream-colored coat and carrying a clipboard. Her blonde hair was styled in that specific way that screamed, "I would like to speak to the manager," and her expression radiated disapproval. "Mr. Anderson," she called out, not bothering to approach closer than the sidewalk. "That's me," I said, leaning on my shovel. "I am Sharon Mitchell, president of the Pinecrest Estates HOA board. I wanted to personally follow up on your violation notice." Sharon. Of course her name was Sharon. The universe had a sense of humor. "I am working on it right now, as you can see," I said, gesturing to my half-cleared lawn. "Yes, well, you are already past the deadline, which means the fine has begun accruing. However, if you complete the work by end of business today, we will waive the first day's fine as a courtesy." "How generous," I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. "Can I ask why this rule is suddenly being enforced? I have lived here 2 winters, and nobody has ever mentioned it before." Sharon's expression tightened. "The board has decided to take a more active role in maintaining community standards. We have received complaints from several residents about the neighborhood looking unkempt during winter months. We are simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to when they purchased their homes here." "Complaints from who?" "That information is confidential." "Now, I suggest you finish your snow removal before the day is over. We would hate to see this become a larger issue." She turned and walked back to her Lexus without waiting for a response. I watched her drive away, anger simmering in my chest. This was not about community standards. This was about control. Sharon Mitchell had decided to flex her authority, and she had chosen snow removal as her hill to die on, literally and figuratively. I spent another 2 hours finishing the lawn, piling the snow along the curb. My entire body ached and I was exhausted. But at least my property was clear, and I would not have to deal with fines. Or so I thought. The next morning, another orange envelope was waiting for me. This time, the violation was for improper snow disposal. According to the notice, I had created unsightly snow mounds along the public curb and needed to remove them immediately. The fine, another $500 per day. I actually laughed. It was either that or scream. They had created an impossible situation. I could not keep the snow on my property, but I also could not put it on the curb. Where exactly was I supposed to put it? Was I expected to haul it away in trucks? I called the HOA office again. This time, a different voice answered, younger and less hostile. Pinecrest Estates, HOA, this is Jennifer speaking. Hi, Jennifer. This is Frank Anderson. I need to understand something about these snow removal rules. I cleared my property yesterday as instructed, but now I am being fined for where I put the snow. Where exactly am I supposed to put it? Let me check the guidelines. I heard papers shuffling. It says here that snow should be removed from the property entirely and cannot be placed in areas visible from the street or common areas. Removed from the property entirely. How am I supposed to melt it? I don't actually know, Mr. Anderson. Maybe you could haul it away somehow. I am sorry, I am just reading what the guidelines say. Mrs. Mitchell writes most of these policies. Is Mrs. Mitchell available? She is not in the office right now. She usually works from home unless there is a board meeting. When is the next board meeting? Thursday evening at 7 in the community center. It is open to all residents. Great. I will be there. Thank you, Jennifer. I hung up and immediately started texting with Greg and other neighbors who had received violations. We formed a group chat and began coordinating. By that evening, we had a list of 17 households that had received snow-related violations. The fines ranged from $500 to $1,500, depending on lot size and supposed severity of the violation. Thursday could not come fast enough. I spent the next few days documenting everything, taking photos of my cleared property, screenshots of weather reports showing the snowfall amounts, and copies of all my violation notices. I also did some research on Colorado HOA law and discovered some interesting facts about enforcement procedures and fine limitations. Thursday evening arrived with another light dusting of snow, just enough to be ironic. I arrived at the community center at 6:45 to find the parking lot already packed. Apparently, word had spread beyond our group chat. At least 40 residents were filing into the building, many of them clutching orange envelopes. The community center meeting room was set up with a folding table at the front where 5 board members sat, Sharon Mitchell in the center. The rest of the room had rows of plastic chairs, nearly all of them filled. The energy in the room was tense. Sharon called the meeting to order at exactly 7. Good evening, everyone. We have quite a turnout tonight. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that board meetings have a specific agenda, and we will allocate 15 minutes at the end for resident comments. A man in the front row stood up. Sharon, most of us are here about the snow violations. Can we address that first? Mr. Patterson, please sit down. We will follow proper procedure. The meeting dragged through mundane topics. Approval of last month's minutes, Treasury report, updates on landscaping contracts for the spring. Sharon was clearly stalling, running out the clock. By the time we reached resident comments, it was already 8 o'clock, and people were getting restless. Sharon looked out at the crowd with a tight smile. We now have 15 minutes for resident comments. Please keep your remarks brief, so everyone has a chance to speak. I raised my hand immediately, along with at least 20 other people. Sharon pointed at an elderly woman in the second row, probably hoping for someone less confrontational. Mrs. Henderson stood slowly, using a cane for support. Sharon, I received a violation notice for snow on my property. I am 78 years old. I cannot shovel snow anymore. I hired a service to clear my driveway and walkway, but they told me they cannot legally haul away snow. What am I supposed to do, Mrs. Henderson? We understand that some residents may have physical limitations. However, the rules apply equally to everyone. Perhaps you could hire a more comprehensive service. I am on a fixed income. I cannot afford to hire someone to haul away snow, even if such a service existed. Sharon made a note on her clipboard. We will take your concerns under advisement. Next question. I stood up before she could call on anyone else. Frank Anderson, 2847 Snowberry Lane. I want to know the legal basis for fines that exceed the actual cost of snow removal. Colorado HOA law limits fines to reasonable amounts that correspond to the actual harm or cost created by the violation. $500 a day for snow that will melt naturally within a week or two is not reasonable by any legal standard. Sharon's expression hardened. Mr. Anderson, the board has consulted with our attorney, and we are confident that our enforcement procedures are legal. The fines are meant to encourage prompt compliance. Then I would like to see the legal opinion in writing. Residents have a right to review any legal advice the board uses to justify their actions. That falls under attorney-client privilege. Actually, it does not. Colorado HOA law requires boards to share legal opinions with residents when those opinions are used to justify board actions. I looked it up. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching our exchange. Sharon's face was turning red. We will take your request under advisement. Next question. But I was not done. I also want to know why this rule is being enforced now after years of being ignored. And I want to know where residents are supposed to put the snow, since we are being fined both for having it on our property and for putting it at the curb. Mr. Anderson, your time is up. Please sit down. Answer the questions, Sharon, someone shouted from the back. Other voices joined in. The room was turning into chaos. Sharon banged her gavel, a ridiculous little wooden hammer that she wielded like a weapon. Order. We will have order. If you cannot conduct yourselves appropriately, we will end this meeting right now. Greg stood up. You are not going to bully us into accepting unfair fines. Half this room has been hit with violations. We all want answers. Sharon gathered her papers and stood. This meeting is adjourned. The board will send out written responses to resident concerns within 30 days. 30 days. Someone yelled. The fines are accruing now. But Sharon and the other board members were already heading for the side door. They left the room in a coordinated exit, leaving 40-some angry residents behind. The community center erupted in conversation. People were furious, comparing violation notices, sharing stories of interactions with Sharon and the HOA office. Greg pulled together a group of us who seemed most ready to take action. We need to do something, Greg said. We can't just let them fine us into oblivion over snow. We could sue, suggested a woman named Patricia. Class action lawsuit against the HOA. That takes time and money, I said, and knowing Sharon, she will drag it out as long as possible while the fines keep piling up. What if we all just refuse to pay? Greg asked. They can put liens on our houses, Patricia said. I know someone in Denver whose HOA foreclosed over unpaid fines. It is legal in Colorado. We spent an hour brainstorming, but nothing felt quite right. Legal action was expensive and slow. Refusing to pay was risky. Appealing to Sharon's better nature was clearly pointless since she did not have one. I drove home that night feeling defeated. The temperature had dropped again, and more snow was forecasted for the weekend. Another 8 to 10 inches, according to the Weather Service. Which meant another round of violations, more fines, more of Sharon Mitchell's power trip. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. There had to be a solution. Some way to make Sharon understand how ridiculous this situation was. Some way to make her feel even a fraction of the frustration she was inflicting on everyone else. That is when the idea hit me. The HOA office was located in a small professional building at the main entrance to Pinecrest Estates. The building also housed a real estate office and an insurance agency. There was a large parking lot in front, and a well-maintained entrance area with decorative landscaping, and a sign that read "Welcome to Pinecrest Estates, a premier community." If Sharon wanted snow removed from private properties so badly, maybe she would appreciate having it all in one convenient location. The more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. It was petty, sure, probably childish, but it was also perfectly legal. The HOA office entrance was technically common area property, which meant it belonged to all residents equally. I would not be trespassing or vandalizing anything. I would simply be relocating snow from my property to a shared community space. The next morning, Friday, I called in sick to work. My job as a software developer was fully remote anyway, so taking a day off was not a problem. I spent the morning researching snow removal equipment rental. What I needed was a small skid steer loader with a bucket attachment, perfect for moving large quantities of snow quickly. I found a rental place in Boulder that had one available. $200 for a day rental, which seemed like a bargain compared to the $500 daily fines Sharon was threatening me with. I hitched up my small utility trailer, drove to the rental place, and an hour later I was heading back home with a bright yellow Bobcat secured on the trailer. Getting the Bobcat off the trailer and onto my property took some careful maneuvering, but I had watched enough YouTube videos to figure it out. By noon, I was sitting in the cab, controls in hand, ready to begin my snow relocation project. My front lawn still had some snow on it from the recent dusting. My backyard, which I had not bothered to clear since it was not visible from the street, had the full 8 inches from earlier in the week. I started there, scooping up massive buckets of snow and piling it near my driveway. The Bobcat made the work absurdly easy. What had taken me 6 hours with a shovel took less than 90 minutes with the machine. I created a mountain of snow at the end of my driveway, probably 6 feet tall and 10 feet around. It was glorious. Then I loaded the Bobcat back onto the trailer, secured it properly, and hooked it up to my truck. The HOA office was only half a mile away, at the neighborhood entrance. I drove slowly, following all traffic laws, very aware that I was pulling a trailer with a piece of heavy equipment through a residential area. The professional building parking lot was mostly empty on a Friday afternoon. I parked my truck and trailer at the far end, then unloaded the Bobcat again. From the parking lot, I could see the HOA office windows. The lights were on. Sharon's silver Lexus was parked in a reserved spot near the entrance. Perfect. I fired up the Bobcat and drove it across the parking lot to my truck. Then I drove back home, loaded up as much snow as the bucket could carry, and returned to the HOA office. I deposited the first load right in front of the main entrance, creating a pile about 3 feet high directly in front of the door. Then I went back for another load, and another, and another. It took 12 trips to move all the snow from my property to the HOA office entrance. By the time I was finished, there was a wall of snow blocking the entire front entrance of the building, at least 7 feet high and stretching the full width of the entrance alcove. The glass doors were completely obscured. Nobody was getting in or out through the front without a shovel and a lot of effort. I stood back and admired my work. It was beautiful in its own way, a pristine white monument to petty revenge. I took several photos for documentation purposes, then loaded the Bobcat back onto my trailer and drove it back to the rental place. By the time I got home, it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. I felt energized despite the physical work. I had taken action, made a statement, and most importantly, I had cleared all the snow from my property in the process. Sharon could not find me now. My phone started ringing at 4:30. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Another call came 5 minutes later, same unknown number. Then a text from Greg. Dude, did you seriously dump snow at the HOA office? It is all over the neighborhood Facebook group. I checked the Pinecrest Estates Facebook page and found multiple posts with photos of my snow wall. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. People were calling me a hero, posting laughing emojis, tagging their friends. A few people expressed concern that I would face retaliation, but most residents seemed thrilled that someone had finally stood up to Sharon. My doorbell rang at 5:15. I looked through the peephole and saw Sharon Mitchell standing on my porch, her face bright red, her posture radiating fury. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Mr. Anderson, what you did today is unacceptable and possibly illegal. I am giving you until tomorrow morning to remove that snow from the HOA office entrance, or I will have you arrested for vandalism and harassment. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression neutral. Sharon, I cleared all the snow from my property as required by HOA regulations. I disposed of it in a common area, which I have every right to access as a resident and dues-paying member of this HOA. I did not damage any property, and I did not trespass. I simply moved snow from one location to another. You blocked the entrance to our office. The office has a rear entrance that is fully accessible, I checked. And besides, the snow will melt eventually. It is just weather, Sharon, natural precipitation, nothing to get upset about. Her hands were shaking, whether from cold or anger I could not tell. You think you are clever, don't you? You think this little stunt changes anything? I will bury you in fines, Mr. Anderson. I will make your life in this neighborhood hell. Actually, Sharon, I think you should talk to a lawyer before you make any more threats. Because what you are describing sounds a lot like harassment and abuse of power. I have documented everything, including the fact that you showed up at my house to threaten me personally. I am sure the other residents would be very interested to know that the HOA president is engaging in intimidation tactics. She opened her mouth, closed it, then spun on her heel and marched back to her car. She peeled out of my driveway with enough force to scatter gravel across my lawn. I closed the door and exhaled slowly. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I had just declared war on my HOA president, and there was no going back now. The weekend brought the forecasted snowstorm, dropping another 9 inches on Boulder. I spent Saturday clearing my property again, this time renting the Bobcat for a second day. And once my property was clear, I made another dozen trips to the HOA office entrance, adding to my snow wall until it was nearly 10 feet tall. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Some people thought I was a legend. Others worried I was making things worse. A few suggested we organize a petition to remove Sharon from the board. By Sunday evening, someone had created an online petition that garnered over 100 signatures from neighborhood residents. Monday morning brought certified mail. A cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney, demanding that I stop depositing snow at the HOA office and threatening legal action if I continued. The letter claimed I was creating a public nuisance and interfering with business operations. I scanned the letter and emailed it to a real estate attorney in Denver named Thomas Wu, who specialized in HOA disputes. I had found his name during my research, and his website said he offered free initial consultations. Within 2 hours, he called me back. Mr. Anderson, I have reviewed your situation, and I have to say, this is one of the more creative HOA disputes I have encountered. I have a few questions for you. We talked for 30 minutes. I explained the snow removal rules, the impossible standards, the fines, Sharon's enforcement tactics, and my decision to relocate my snow to common area property. Thomas listened carefully, asking clarifying questions. "Okay, here is my assessment," Thomas said. The HOA is on very shaky legal ground with their snow removal enforcement. The fines are almost certainly excessive under Colorado law, and the 12-hour removal requirement is arguably unreasonable given weather conditions and safety concerns. Your snow relocation is legally defensible as long as you are only depositing snow from your own property, and you are not damaging anything or creating a genuine safety hazard. The cease and desist letter is mostly bluster, so I can keep doing it. Technically, yes, though I would not recommend it as a long-term strategy. What I would recommend is filing a formal complaint against the HOA with the Colorado HOA Information Office and potentially pursuing a lawsuit for improper enforcement and excessive fines. We could also push for the board to hold a special election to remove Sharon Mitchell, assuming we can get enough resident support. How much would all that cost? For the formal complaint, I can help you draft it for a flat fee of $500. For a lawsuit, we would be looking at several $1,000s minimum, though if we win, the HOA would be required to pay your legal fees. The special election would just require getting 20% of homeowners to sign a petition, which it sounds like you could easily do based on what you have told me. I thanked Thomas and told him I would think about it. $500 for help with a formal complaint seemed reasonable. A multi-$1,000 lawsuit was a bigger commitment, but it might be necessary. That evening, I organized a meeting at Greg's house with about 15 neighbors who had been most vocal about the snow violations. We sat in his living room, drinking coffee and beer, discussing our options. "I say we go straight to a lawsuit," said Patricia. "Sharon has abused her power and she needs to face consequences." "Lawsuits take forever," countered an older man named Robert. "My brother sued his HOA in California, and it took 3 years to resolve. We need something faster." "What about the special election?" I asked. "If we can get enough signatures, we could force a vote to remove Sharon and any board members who have supported her. That could happen within a couple of months." Greg nodded. "I like that approach. It is faster than a lawsuit, and it addresses the root problem. Sharon is the one pushing all this enforcement nonsense. If we remove her, the new board could rescind the fines and change the enforcement policies." We voted on it. 12 out of 15 people supported pursuing the special election, while also filing formal complaints with the state HOA office. I volunteered to coordinate the petition drive and work with Thomas Wu on the complaints. Over the next 2 weeks, we collected signatures. We set up tables at the neighborhood entrance, posted in the Facebook group, and went door to door. The response was overwhelming. Residents were fed up with Sharon's heavy-handed leadership, not just over the snow issue but over other nitpicky violations she had been enforcing. Apparently, people had been fined for having the wrong color of outdoor furniture, for parking in their own driveways overnight, for holiday decorations that stayed up too long. The snow violations had been the last straw. By the end of 2 weeks, we had signatures from 41% of homeowners, more than double what we needed. I submitted the petition to the HOA board, along with a formal demand for a special election within 45 days. Sharon tried to fight it, of course. She claimed the signatures were invalid, that we had not followed proper procedure, that the petition was based on false information. But Thomas Wu reviewed our submission and confirmed we had done everything correctly. Under Colorado HOA law, the board had no choice but to schedule the election. During those 2 weeks, I also continued my snow relocation project. Every time it snowed, which happened 3 more times, I would clear my property and deposit the snow at the HOA office entrance. My snow wall became a neighborhood landmark, People would drive by to take photos. Some residents started leaving offerings, little flags, funny signs, even a carved snowman on top of the pile. Sharon filed a police report claiming I was harassing her and vandalizing HOA property. 2 officers came to my house on a Wednesday afternoon. I showed them my documentation, photos of my cleared property, copies of the violation notices, the cease and desist letter, and Thomas Wu's legal assessment. The officers looked at each other, clearly trying not to laugh. "Sir, we understand there is a dispute with your HOA, but this seems like a civil matter," the younger officer said. "You are not breaking any criminal laws by moving snow around. So I can keep doing it. We can't tell you what to do, but we also can't arrest you for it. Our advice would be to work this out through proper channels." They left, and I imagine they had quite a story to tell back at the station. The special election was scheduled for a Thursday evening in mid-February. The ballot was simple. Should Sharon Mitchell be removed as HOA board president? Yes or no? If yes won, there would be a second election 2 weeks later to choose a new president from among nominated residents. The campaign leading up to the election was intense. Sharon sent out multiple emails defending her leadership, claiming she was only trying to maintain property values and enforce rules that everyone had agreed to. She accused me by name of being a troublemaker and said that if residents voted her out, the neighborhood would descend into chaos. Our side focused on documented facts: the excessive fines, the unreasonable enforcement, the complaints from elderly and disabled residents who could not physically comply with Sharon's demands, and her pattern of using HOA authority to bully people she disagreed with. Election day arrived. Voting was conducted by mail and ballot over a 1-week period, with results to be counted and announced at a special board meeting. The turnout was massive, 87% of homeowners, which Thomas told me was almost unheard of for an HOA election. I attended the vote count at the community center along with about 50 other residents. The atmosphere was electric. Sharon sat at the board table, stone-faced, while the remaining board members counted ballots by hand as required by HOA bylaws. The results were announced at 8:30. 68% voted yes to remove Sharon Mitchell as board president. She was out. The room erupted in applause. People were hugging, high-fiving, cheering. It felt like we had won a major victory, which in a sense we had. We had used the democratic process to remove someone who had abused their authority. Sharon gathered her belongings and walked out without a word, her face pale and tight. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The following 2 weeks brought a sense of calm to the neighborhood. The remaining board members immediately suspended all snow-related fines, pending a policy review. They sent out an email apologizing for the enforcement issues and promising to work with residents to develop reasonable winter weather policies. The election for a new president brought forward 3 candidates, all of them reasonable people who had lived in the neighborhood for years. Greg won with 53% of the vote. At his first board meeting as president, he proposed eliminating the 12-hour snow removal rule entirely and replacing it with a simple requirement to clear walkways within a reasonable time for safety purposes. The motion passed unanimously. Greg also proposed refunding all snow-related fines that had been assessed since January. This one was trickier since it involved a significant amount of money. But after reviewing the legal opinions Thomas Wu had provided, the board agreed that the fines had been improperly assessed and voted to refund them in full. I received a check for $2,000, representing the 8 days of fines Sharon had assessed against me. Other residents received similar refunds. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who had spoken at that first contentious board meeting, received $3,500 and cried when Greg personally delivered the check to her door. But the story did not end there. Because while we had won the battle against Sharon's tyrannical HOA leadership, she apparently was not ready to accept defeat. In late February, I received notice that Sharon was suing me personally for damages, claiming my snow relocation had caused water damage to the HOA office when the snow melted, and that I had intentionally harassed her and caused her emotional distress. She was seeking $25,000 in damages. I immediately contacted Thomas Wu, who reviewed the lawsuit and shook his head. This is a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is suing you to punish you for organizing against her. It has no legal merit whatsoever. Can she do that? Anyone can file a lawsuit, but that does not mean they will win. Colorado has strong anti-slap laws. We can file a motion to dismiss, and if we win, Sharon will have to pay your attorney fees. I would be happy to represent you. The case dragged on for 2 months. Sharon's attorney filed motion after motion, each one more frivolous than the last. They claimed I had created a public nuisance, that I had violated harassment statutes, that I had intentionally inflicted emotional distress, even that I had engaged in some kind of conspiracy to damage HOA property. Thomas dismantled every argument with ease. He submitted evidence showing that no water damage had occurred to the HOA office, that my actions were legal and justified, and that Sharon had a documented pattern of abusing her authority and harassing residents who disagreed with her. In April, the judge granted our motion to dismiss and ordered Sharon to pay my attorney fees, which totaled nearly $8,000. The judge also issued a written opinion that was scathing in its assessment of Sharon's lawsuit, calling it a transparent attempt to punish a homeowner for exercising his legal rights to petition for change within his community. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. In May, I was contacted by the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. A detective named Sarah Rodriguez wanted to meet with me regarding a criminal investigation. My stomach dropped when I got the call. Had Sharon somehow convinced the DA to pursue charges against me? I met Detective Rodriguez at a coffee shop near downtown Boulder. She was in her 40s, professional and direct. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for meeting with me. I want to assure you upfront that you are not under investigation. In fact, you may be a witness in a case we are building." "A case against who?" "Sharon Mitchell and several other members of the previous Pinecrest Estates HOA board. We have received multiple complaints about financial irregularities related to the HOA's operations. We would like to know if you have any information about how funds were being managed during Miss Mitchell's tenure as president." I told Detective Rodriguez everything I knew, which was not much. I had not paid close attention to HOA finances beyond my monthly dues. But I mentioned that, during the special election campaign, several residents had questioned where fine money was going, since the amounts being collected seemed disproportionate to the services being provided. "That aligns with what we are hearing from others," Rodriguez said. "Would you be willing to provide copies of any documentation you have related to the snow violations and fines?" I gave her everything: violation notices, emails, the cease and desist letter, records of the fines assessed and later refunded. Rodriguez thanked me and said they would be in touch if they needed anything else. Over the next several weeks, rumors began circulating in the neighborhood. The DA's office had subpoenaed HOA financial records. Sharon had hired a criminal defense attorney. Other former board members were being questioned. In July, the bombshell dropped. Sharon Mitchell and two other former board members were indicted on charges of theft and embezzlement. According to the indictment, they had been systematically inflating fine assessments, collecting money that exceeded what was authorized by HOA rules, and then diverting a portion of those funds to personal accounts disguised as consulting fees and administrative expenses. The snow removal enforcement had been part of a scheme to generate as much fine revenue as possible. Sharon had known the rules were unreasonable and unenforceable, but she had pursued violations anyway because every fine meant more money flowing into accounts she controlled. Over 3 years, she and her co-conspirators had stolen an estimated $170,000 from the HOA. The neighborhood was stunned. People were angry, betrayed, and vindicated all at once. Those orange violation envelopes had not been about maintaining standards or protecting property values. They had been about theft. Sharon's criminal trial took place in October. I was called as a witness and testified about the snow violations, the excessive fines, and Sharon's aggressive enforcement tactics. Other residents testified about different types of violations they had received, painting a picture of a systematic effort to generate fine revenue. The prosecution also presented forensic accounting evidence showing exactly how money had been diverted. Sharon had created fake vendor accounts and submitted false invoices for work that was never performed. She had authorized payments to herself and her co-conspirators for made-up services. The snow enforcement had been particularly lucrative because it affected so many residents simultaneously. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Sharon was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to repay the full amount stolen plus interest. Her co-conspirators received similar sentences. I sat in the courtroom and watched Sharon being led away in handcuffs, and I felt an odd mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had brought this on herself through greed and an obsession with control, but it was still a tragedy to see someone throw their life away like this. The HOA, now under Greg's steady leadership, filed a civil suit to recover additional damages and legal costs. Sharon's assets were seized, including her house in Pinecrest Estates, which was sold to help repay what she had stolen. By December, life in the neighborhood had returned to something resembling normal. The new board implemented reasonable rules, communicated clearly with residents, and managed finances transparently with regular audits. The snow removal policy was simple and sensible. Clear your walkways for safety when you can, and if you need help, the HOA maintains a list of volunteers who assist elderly and disabled residents. I never rented another Bobcat, though every time it snowed, I thought about my magnificent snow wall with a certain fondness. That pile of snow had been the catalyst for change, the physical manifestation of resident frustration that had sparked a movement. Greg and I became close friends through the whole ordeal. We often joked about starting a consulting business helping other neighborhoods deal with tyrannical HOAs, though neither of us was serious. One experience like this was enough for a lifetime. On a cold evening in January, almost exactly a year after I had received that first orange violation envelope, Greg and I stood in his driveway, beers in hand, watching fresh snow fall on Pinecrest Estates. "You know what the crazy thing is," Greg said. "Sharon could have been a good HOA president. She just had to not be a thief and a tyrant." "That is asking a lot of some people," I said. "True. Hey, you ever regret buying here?" With all the drama, I thought about it for a moment, watching the snow accumulate on the peaceful street, lights glowing in windows all around us. "No," I said finally. "This is a good neighborhood. We just had to fight for it. Fight for it with a bobcat full of snow, Greg said, laughing. Whatever works. We clinked our beer bottles together and stood there in the quiet of the winter evening, snow falling softly around us. The HOA office had long since cleaned up the entrance area, but sometimes when I drove past, I could still see my snow wall in my mind's eye, 7 feet of frozen rebellion blocking the door. It had been petty and childish and absolutely necessary. Sometimes the only way to respond to unreasonable authority is with creative resistance. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even if that stand involves moving several tons of snow with rented heavy equipment. The legal system had ultimately provided justice, but justice had only come because residents were willing to organize, to document, to petition, and yes, to push back in memorable ways. If I had just paid the fines and kept quiet, Sharon would still be in power, still stealing from the HOA, still making everyone's lives miserable. I finished my beer and said goodnight to Greg, then walked back to my house through the falling snow. My driveway would need clearing in the morning, but there was no rush, no deadline, no orange envelope waiting to threaten me with fines. Just ordinary winter weather in Colorado, beautiful and manageable. Inside, I settled onto my couch and pulled out my laptop. An email was waiting from Thomas Wu with the subject line, Final HOA Matter. I opened it, curious. Frank, wanted to let you know that the last of Sharon Mitchell's restitution payments have been processed. The HOA received full repayment today, and the civil case is now closed. I know it has been a long road, but you should be proud of what you and your neighbors accomplished. You held someone accountable who thought they were above the law, and you helped create real change in your community. Not many people have the courage to do what you did. If you ever need legal help in the future, I hope you will reach out. Best regards, Thomas. I closed the laptop and smiled. It had been a long road, but we had reached the end with the right outcome. Sharon was in prison where she belonged. The HOA was functioning properly under honest leadership. Residents felt heard and respected, and I had learned valuable lessons about standing up for what is right, even when it is inconvenient or risky. The snow continued falling outside my window, peaceful and quiet, just weather doing what weather does. Tomorrow I would clear my driveway with my regular shovel, taking my time, maybe chatting with neighbors who were doing the same. No bobcat required, though I would never regret renting one when I did. Sometimes life gives you snow, and sometimes that snow is accompanied by unreasonable HOA violations from a corrupt board president. The key is knowing when to shovel responsibly and when to make a statement. I had done both, and I had no regrets about either approach. As I headed to bed that night, I passed by the framed copy of that first orange violation envelope that I had hung on my wall, a reminder of where this whole crazy journey had started. Just a piece of paper with some bureaucratic language and an unreasonable demand. But it had led to exposing corruption, removing a tyrant, reforming an HOA, and ultimately seeing justice served. Not bad for a dispute that started over 8 inches of snow on a January morning in Boulder, Colorado. Not bad at all.